A truism is a common statement that is so true that it's obvious. And a cliché is something that is so overused that it's actually trite and ineffective. So I'm going to commit the double transgression at the beginning of my homily of saying something which is both a truism and a cliché. I'm going to say that we are here today in this here and now because of those who came before us. Two more quick definitions. Worship means to consider that which has worth. And a homily is, oh, rejoice your heart, a shortened sermon, which is generally based around a story. So this morning, I want to tell you a story about this congregation and the way it interprets our living tradition. It's a story which is worth considering again and again, even though you might have heard parts of it before, and this is my quiet shout out to all the people who helped me gather this information for today. A living tradition. It sounds easy, but think about it. What it means to have a tradition where you're never quite sure what the next thing is that you might be called to do. In our year-long exploration of our history and our theology in our ministers' class this year, we have had the opportunity to think from the point of view of our religious ancestors, to realize where they were and the risks they took and how far we have come from where they started. Here are some of the things that I think our Universalist and Unitarian ancestors could not have imagined when they began their questioning hundreds of years ago, when they began to think and write with their quill pens. I think some of these are ones that our Unitarian Universalist ancestors could not have imagined when they formed our Association of Congregations 63 years ago. A religion based on sources that include but are not limited to Christian scripture. A religion where the idea of any fixed form of God is optional. People of all races and social classes free to worship together. Women and people who are bisexual, gay, and lesbian in leadership and worship. And religious education, which includes something called Our Whole Lives, which teaches human sexuality in the context of our faith tradition. I just think that some of these things are not what our religious forefathers had in mind when they began to question the orthodoxy that was all around them, and yet they moved forward anyway. And this is the story of this congregation, this amazing congregation, and how it has done the same kind of questioning, the same kind of moving forward for more than 60 years. We are here because of the dedication of many, many people, many of whom are around us now only as a cloud of witnesses. We are here because they took risks, because of their dedication, because of the courageous positions they took, sometimes without full information about how it was all going to work out. Here are some of those things in the history of this place. Coming to this location and finding these 5 acres and realizing this was the place, even though how to pay for it was not apparent at the time. Taking the risk in those first exciting years to try new things, like marriage encounter and small groups talking together about all kinds of things. And then over the years, small group ministry and Buddhism and labyrinth walks. Taking stands when they were not popular, against wars such as the ones in Vietnam and Iraq, against housing segregation in this town of Walnut Creek, and against efforts, time and time again, to outlaw same-sex marriage. choosing to build this very sanctuary in which we worship today, because the Gilmartin building across the way was overflowing, even though no one was exactly certain which new people would come here. We are here because people in their here and now thought outside the box to include ours. Such as when they discovered that they couldn't get enough financing to build the Gilmartin and White buildings and devised a way to loan the money to themselves through loans from members. Or when people spoke out for peace at a time that was really not one that welcomed that kind of message, and they didn't know if any of their neighbors were actually open to hearing that message. Or when this sanctuary was built and dedicated, but not quite done with inspections, so that the first couple rounds of services that were held here were called seated tours until the proper documentation could be obtained. Or when the consultant who came to help plan the funding for building the fellowship hall said that he was pretty certain that the congregation only had the resources to raise among them $800,000 to $900,000 for a project that they knew would cost more than $1 million. And the congregation said, "Imagine that," and did it anyway, and in the end, raised $1.4 million. And then when that hall opened and we began hosting winter nights, and we said we wanted to do it with as many people as possible rather than as few, and that we wanted more than 100 volunteers, so it would be an act of justice for the whole congregation. And as Carol Sue said, now we have more than 200. We are here because of the dedicated and repeated offerings of many, much more mundane acts as well. Those original people who gathered in a living room, meeting together at a time when one really paid a social cost to have that kind of liberated view in a community such as this, the then small community of Walnut Creek. Showing up for worship or for committee meetings or for a rally or to stand on a street corner, even when you're tired or really, really busy. Giving time and money to make this place work, even at the times when your own personal enthusiasm has waned a little bit. Mailing newsletters, making coffee, washing tablecloths, raking leaves, answering yet another call to fix something that is broken, answering yet another call from those in our wider communities to fix something that is broken. Showing up at conversations about race and difference, and doing so even though it makes you uncomfortable. Sitting with your friend in the last hours before death, or in the first hours after a birth, and coming back into conversation, even when you are angry. In our here and now, we too are called to think of those yet to come, the more and later, if you will. And when we think through that lens, we have to ask, will we have the same constancy? Will we keep showing up so that others will have a place to do so? Will we keep being the stewards of this tradition of love and unity which has been given to us, this legacy of freedom, sustaining community, and justice seeking? What risks will we take for those who come after us? All around us, there are signs of new challenges, new things that our living tradition will have to address. More and more people walk into this door and I have the same disquieting conversation with them. They say, "Oh, yes, this is my first time here, but I have been watching you for many months on the videos." Our virtual presence. We see a growing passion from those who walk into our doors, to know that we are making a difference, and to make sure that what we are professing is what we are addressing in our work in the community. We see families coming for religious education grounded in real and sustaining truths which can help our children and youth navigate an exciting but sometimes very scary world. And adults seeking meaningful ideas and practices so that they can continue to learn and grow throughout the entire span of their lives. And an ever increasing contact in all of our daily lives with people who live vastly different lives than we do, and who still struggle to make meaning in the same way that we do. So this is the story that we tell one another. This is the story about how we contemplate those precious lives born into this community and those which we have lost to the hard realities of death. This is the story where we rejoice in all of those of you who said this year or last year that you were one of us on this journey of community, willing to make its struggles your struggles and to make its joy your joy. I think this is a story that moves beyond the cliché, that is larger than the truism, that moves into the realm of those timeless truths. When we know what a privilege it is to be here and what a legacy we have been given. This is the blessing of our larger tradition, and it's the blessing of our neighbors who make this a right and good place. This is the blessing we will pass on to those who come after us. For we are our living tradition.